Peter, and welcome to the Gaggle, where we challenge and, if necessary, destroy media narratives. It is now time for our live stream, 10 a.m. Eastern Time. It is kind of very early on the East Coast, it's even early on the West Coast, but we have very loyal followers, and who actually they go to the trouble of setting their alarm clocks nice and early. So kudos to them. So yesterday, Peter, was not a very good day for Russia. I did a short podcast late yesterday evening, basically summarizing the attack on Sevastopol, as well as the terrorist attacks in Dagestan. I mean, we know a little more about the Dagestan attacks than we did when I did the podcast. So, what are you hearing? What's the story that you've learned?
Well, there hasn't been a whole lot of more details, except for grim images and the usual explanations. I mean, I remember saying forebodingly in the first couple of weeks of the special military operation, I remember telling my team, is that when things really get ugly, it will be terrorism, and that's where we are right now. This is no coincidence. The you look at media, the restive, it's a restive region. Okay, well, it's been quiet for quite a long time because the Kremlin has been investing a lot of money into infrastructure and schools and things like this, and so the ability to recruit for these Islamist groups have gone down. I'm not going to be surprised if their outside forces were involved in this. I think we're going to see a lot more of it, and it's going to be against civilians. It's a coward's way to fight a conflict. And how was it direct or indirect or a wink of an eye? Of course, the West knows this. Okay, they've done it before, George. I mean, the second Chechen operation was all about foreign fighters coming into in Chechnya, and I can remember ABC News was saying, their what were they called? The freedom fighters. Yeah, the freedom fighters. And they were the most odious people, Wahhabi ideology and whatnot. So we've seen this before. Is it going to work? No, it's not going to work. It's not going to unravel the Caucasus and all of that. No, it's not. It just, unfortunately, a lot of people are going to die needless deaths. Okay, and it doesn't change what's going on in Ukraine. It doesn't change anything about Russia's confrontation with the West/NATO. All it is pathetic bloodshed that will achieve nothing.
Right. No, it's obviously that. I was surprised by at least the breakdown of the casualty figures.
Me too.
It seems like almost all of the casualty figures are the police.
Yep.
Something like 15 police officers.
And about 150 injured civilians.
Right, exactly. So that surprised me that there should be such heavy casualties. Now, as far as I can tell, all of the people who have been who took part in the terrorist attacks have been killed, or is that
the word they use here, liquidated? Yes,
liquidated. But their identity, however, remains somewhat obscure, because there's talk about that some of them were sons of a local big shot, some local officials, but that hasn't been confirmed. Have you heard anything about that?
I haven't heard anything about the identity, and I think they're keeping that close to their chest because that's going to obviously tell us more about the motive and possible means, obviously. And unfortunately, everyone, Russia has experience with this. Okay, in the 1990s and the early 2000s, there was unfortunately a lot of that kind of activity in that region, and so It's under investigation. Again, as they say here, I'm sure we're going to get a full picture, but the police took heavy casualties. I was shocked by that.
Right, exactly. I mean, 15 is
because it looks
that's
like
a very
they took
severe casualty numbers.
Well, they took there was seems to be the intention to inflict heavy damages on the authorities. Okay, so I mean that was the motive there. The attacking a synagogue in a Orthodox church. We're going to have to figure out how that fits into it, or is that just trying to establish some kind of narrative? Is it Islamic fundamentalism, or is it somebody that has a grudge? Okay, but I already looked at, as I usually do, just a kind of cursory review. It's ISIS and ISIL and all these other things that people are purely speculation. Preciously little information is being released. Okay, unlike what we saw with the concert hall. That in this case, I mean, obviously, I knew we were going to speak, and I again scoured to see if there was anything new, and essentially not.
Right. I have to say, now, I don't want to start saying, who's responsible, who isn't responsible, because we don't, we don't have too much evidence. But somehow, when you think of the targets, first of all, you kill an Orthodox priest, particularly brutal way. Then you attack.
And he was an old man too.
He was an old man, yeah. And then you attack a synagogue. Now, what conclusions do you draw from that? Somebody's trying to provoke religious strife. That now Christians and Jews are suddenly going to go and absolutely wild with rage at Muslims. I think, well, somebody's trying to create a war here, and that's why it makes me think that there's somebody else behind it. There's someone else thinking about let's see if we can find some way of provoking.
Well, this is not an original plan, George. There's nothing original about it. Okay?
No,
we've seen this. We've seen the West do this to Russia. It's the Caucasus are a soft underbelly and things like vulnerability and all of that. And we saw that in Chechnya. So I mean, if you and I are right in our prognosis here right now, we've seen this all before, and it's not going to get traction. It just won't. Okay, that is looking at Russia through a Western lens.
Right. You wouldn't have thought so, but you never can tell. I mean, after all, people are emotional. People react very strongly, and there is something about killing a priest, something about slitting a priest's throat, that causes people to get very, very upset. I mean, it's always been that's the thing that you don't touch. You don't touch priests, because people get very upset about it. So that's why you have to think, well, to target a priest, did it also on a religious holiday like the Pentecost, which means that it was something special. You think, well, there's obviously an objective there, and again, we also had that incident. You remember in Dagestan? It was about a year ago, and we talked about it. Remember that attack at the airport when
That's right.
It was? I guess it was sometime around October, November 2023. There's suddenly this attack. There were Jews coming in from Israel, and then there was this rampaging mob. That again seemed like a setup, sort of, look what's going on in Russia, wild anti-Semitic mobs attacking Jews. So that's why I kind of think that this is of a piece with that.
Well, I agree with you completely. What is not well understood is that there's all kinds of different communities in the Caucasus. There are Jews, there are Muslims, there are Christians, and they've gotten along very, very well. When we have over time in the history of the Russian Empire and since then, these are communities that know each other very well. And that's why you have an outside force. Again, I'd go back to Chechnya, where this Wahhabism, which was completely foreign to Russia, and it was imported here. And so, I mean, many people might have saw it already. As soon as this was happening, I said, is this one of Victoria Nuland's parting gifts? Okay. one of the surprises. Okay, and it like I said, it lacks a lot of imagination. I don't think it's going to get any traction, and they will find out the origins of it through time. But it just again, for me, it's just more. It's kind of a pathetic attempt to sow social unrest. And what it will end up doing is angering all communities. Okay.
Right. Right. So then there was the other incident, which was the attack on Sevastopol. So that was they used these ATACMS missiles. Now, and with the what's that called? The multiple warheads. Those are particularly what that was a phrase. You know, when they have those multiple the multiple warheads on the missiles. You know,
I mean the cluster
bomb, the cluster munitions. Yeah. So that was, you know, the Biden administration had quite some time ago said, fine, you can use our missiles, our long-range missiles on Crimea, because we don't recognize Crimea as part of the Russian Federation. So that in itself doesn't necessarily mean that, oh, this is a signal from the Biden administration that it was said about 2 weeks ago. Hey, you can use the missiles inside Russian territory, where they said that it was, oh, you can use it if it's involved with the fighting in Kharkov. So, oh yeah, well, if Russia's attacking the Kharkov region, yeah, you can use missiles inside Russian territory. But if it's connected with Kharkov, and then Sullivan said, yeah, well, but you can use it, you know, in other cases where Russians are attacking Ukraine, and so therefore, if you need to attack Russian territory, if there's an ongoing attack on Ukrainian territory, that's fine. You know, you can do it there. But of course, you know, once you say that, you know, well, what else doesn't become a legitimate military target? Because then, you know, you can then say, well, what about this arms depot? What about this railway? What about this military base? What about this air base? You know, anything at all can be involved in an ongoing Russian attack on Ukraine. So you basically said, yeah, just do it. Oh, but don't target Moscow.
But they already did. Okay.
Yeah,
I mean,
they did, but not with the ATACMS.
I don't know who the consumer of this Biden mumbo jumbo is. I mean, there've been all kinds of missile attacks against a number of facilities in Russia, refineries, airfields. You know, so I don't know. I mean, they're making it sound like there are delineations and uppers, and none of it makes any sense. I mean, when you're on the receiving end of a missile, say, "Oh, that shouldn't be because they shouldn't be able to target us." No, it's ridiculous. Nobody thinks that way. Okay, right. So I mean, of course, hitting Crimea is more psychological than anything else. Okay, it is just it's another form of terrorism. Is that they're trying to sow fear into the population and demand a harsh reaction. Well, I want a harsh reaction too, but I want it to be well thought out and to have achievable goals, and not to a form of terrorism. I don't think.
Right. No, I mean, I think that's no. Well, that's a given that you know you don't just want to attack civilians. The problem arises, and Russia continues to say this, you know, so, well, you know, the United States is behind this because they can't possibly do these things without targeting information, and the only way to do this is if the United States provides the targeting information with its use of satellites. So that seems to be a very legitimate military target. You hit the satellites.
I agree.
AWACS systems, any drones in the neighborhood, because that's where they're gathering all their intelligence and passing it on to Ukraine.
Well, it's interesting. We had these two events, one in Dagestan, and we had this also in Crimea. But I paid very close attention because there was more information being provided about the attack on Crimea than in Dagestan. And I got the feeling, George, reading what the Ministry of Defense had to say about targeting, tracking, surveillance, and all that. And constantly making reference to American intelligence and satellites gives me a very strong feeling that that's going to be on the agenda. And plus, you know, everyone, that's new territory. I mean, a satellite isn't stationary. It's moving all of the time. Sometimes it's over Russia. Sometimes it's over
Right.
America. Who knows? You know, who
Right.
knows how it goes around the world? So if you take it out over the Pacific, is that Article 5?
No, I don't think anything is
Yeah, in space.
Article 5, and I think that's I think those are absolutely legitimate military targets. The problem is, and I think this is where Russia gets nervous. I don't think they should be, but I think they get nervous. You never know how the United States is going to respond. They don't have to invoke Article 5. They can just simply say Russia is basically waging war against us. We need to attack Russia. You know how these people in Washington think. I mean, you got Lindsey Graham. He's going to be on Sean Hannity and on every other outlet screaming for we need to attack Putin. Look, I mean, it was at the time of Iran. I mean, Iran shot out a drone, and America was ready to start bombing. I mean, it was John Bolton said, "Yeah, that's it. They hit the drone, didn't kill anyone. They just hit the drone. That's it. We got to start bombing Iran." It was only Trump at the last minute said that. I don't think that's a proportionate response. But I don't think that they're going to, in this case, they're not going to be debating like this with Russia. I think there's going to be an enormous push to start directly hitting targets in Russia. And I think that's why Russia has been wary of hitting the satellites. I don't think they should be, but I think that's the reason they've been wary.
Well, I think we're going to find out very, very soon, because if you think about it logically, it's going to have to be done eventually. So no time like the present.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the response here is real anger, because when we looked at the concert hall terrorist attack, that is something that is planned on the ground clandestinely. What we saw in Dagestan, which we don't know very much about. Fighting terror like that is hard, but you can beat it. Russia's been able to do it in the past. But when it comes to something like this, you know all of the elements that went into the attack. It's up there.
Right.
There's no debate about it. So I mean, this is going to have to be done, because it's intolerable to have that happen. I mean, I don't want to have happen, but let's say it's a ship in the Black Sea that's sending all these signals. I think that's a legitimate target. Okay.
But, yeah.
And then let the Biden administration say, okay, all right, is this how we're going to go down the path? Because we're going to go down that path anyway. All right.
Right. Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think that those are legitimate military targets. I mean, if you're involved in directing attacks, particularly if you see this as a Russian territory, it's very hard to say, well, we're not a party to the conflict, we're not a legitimate military target. I mean, Stoltenberg may make all these ridiculous assertions as if somehow, because NATO is not a party to the conflict, so any attack on any NATO target anywhere is somehow an unprovoked attack, and therefore, you can bring up Article 5. But that's such a ridiculous claim. And I think if you have satellites that are obviously directing and targeting Ukrainian attacks on Russian territory, it's just hard to say that is not a legitimate target. And I think absolutely legitimate. I think the drones, all those drones in the Black Sea that are clearly in the business of surveilling Crimea and relaying all this information to Ukraine, I think they're all legitimate targets. And then let the United States say, well, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? And then let Biden go before the American people and say, we're ready to go to war with Russia because they knocked out our drones that were actually being used to destroy targets inside Russia. That's why we're going to war against Russia. See how the American people respond to that.
Well, I mean, let's tear a page from your script, okay, and something that you and I have talked about at great length. I mean, so Russia won't react as the U.S. goes up the escalation ladder. Well, I've always said that they will, and I think this is the opportunity and the moment for it to happen. Okay, if you want to go there, I've said long, and a lot of people repeat it now, but I said it a long time ago, the Russians don't bluff, they act. And so I think we're at that moment. And you and I have been predicting this for many, many weeks right now, with a lot of dread, okay? But this is intolerable. And plus, if it's sovereign territory, you have to protect it, okay? And so start putting the rhetoric into action. And I think that we're going to see something. Now, I think you've hit the nail on the head. I think first, a number of drones are going to suddenly disappear. I mean, the Russians can see them; they know they're there. Okay, and slowly, but surely, they're going to be taken out one by one, and then maybe something in space. The U.S. is so heavily reliant on those things. Would they take out Russian ones? Yes, they would. But my sense is that the Russians are prepared for that. Okay, and so if this is the escalation ladder you want to go up, I think that's where we are. And I think
so. I mean, because the way the Americans and NATO have been playing this little game, they said that somehow, well, we just get a freebie, we get a freebie and say, well, we're not a party to the conflict. You can't hit us, because we're just not a party to the conflict. So therefore, if you hit us, it's an unprovoked attack. And so basically, I think, well, we can do what we like. And so therefore, that's when you attack the drones or the satellites, then you can tell the Americans to say, okay, well, what are you going to do about it? Are you ready now to go to war? So, you're the one who got involved in this. You intervene. This has nothing to do with you. We don't, we don't get involved in conflicts between, I don't know, Texas and Florida. You decided that this is a matter of existential urgency for you. Okay, what are you going to do about it? And I think that this is entirely appropriate, and it should thrust it back onto the West, because the West has been getting a freebie to say, okay, what are you going to do about it? A lot of big talk. Are you now ready to to escalate and go to war with Russia?
Yep, and George, as you've been observing as well as the rest of us, it's almost a certain inevitability the conflict in Palestine will go into Lebanon. So does the United States really want to have a full plate right now? Okay, your satellites are going to be really busy. No, I mean, I was thinking about us meeting today, and I wish I could have something nuanced to say, because that Dagestan thing really upset me. Particularly, we see a lot more footage here, okay? And what you can see on Russian television, it's a lot more liberal, if I can put it that way, than you could see on Western television. It's pretty gory, okay?
Right.
And they don't pixel things out too much here, okay? So. But it's all interconnected as far as I'm concerned. So the hot summer that George and I were predicting, it's heating up, and it's heating up really fast.
All right. So let's take a look at some comments. People here, people are making. Dead man walking. There's U.S. ramping up for nuclear war. Multiple false flag incoming. Respect, gentlemen from Dublin. There's a nice one for you. Buick Adelaide says Lavelle is a legend.
Among my dogs.
Yeah, you're a legend. So there's some.
I must admit, I mean, because of COVID, I stopped traveling, and then now with the conflict in Ukraine, it's not easy for me to move around. But the last time I was in the UK, I was in London in 2020. You followed me a few weeks later.
I think that was in 20. Yeah, that's right. Yeah,
and,
2020.
I was very, very happily received in the streets and cafes of London. I'm pretty surprised. An American working in Moscow had people had such kind words. I was really appreciative.
So Tech Theory Hunter says, let's face it, guys, the Vicky Newlands of the world have a deep hatred for Russia. Okay, yep. Well, I've got the usual stuff. And then so we got there's something I wanted to Mary Kate Golden says NATO is building a bigger base in Romania, bigger than Ramstein. Yeah, they are. It's one of these things that hasn't been reported very much. This huge base that they're building in Romania, not insignificant. Romania is it's a Black Sea power, and it's a very significant base that they're built.
Well, it will compete
It's going to be
with
the biggest base in NATO.
Well, with the one in Kosovo is huge as well.
That's also huge, exactly. But Romania is even
Kosovo of all places, everyone.
Exactly,
wonder why they wanted to dislodge it from.
That's right. Yeah, stolen piece of territory. And then Mary Kate Golden says, "Who else saw Jeffrey Sachs school Piers Morgan?" Now the thing is that Piers Morgan, I find that utterly obnoxious, and I mean, and it's true. People defend him and say, "Yeah, but he had Jeffrey Sachs on. Oh, and he has Mearsheimer on, and he has Norman Finkelstein on."
Yeah, and they all humiliate him.
They all humiliate him. And then yesterday, or maybe the day before, he sent out this tweet in response to Nigel Farage's comments about the origins of the war in Ukraine, and he says, "Putin's little puppet." So that's what he describes Farage as Putin. And then you think, so you have on Mearsheimer, you have on Sachs, who go through the details of that diplomatic history. They're not saying anything different than what Farage said. I mean, obviously they're scholars and they're more learned and they can recite all this, but they're not saying anything different. And after all that, after listening to Sachs and after listening to Mearsheimer, you say something so stupid as calling Farage Putin's little puppet.
Well, everyone, I don't want to turn this into a mutual admiration society, but George and I have had this, we've been on the right side of this from the get-go. And I'm not talking about since February 2022. I'm talking about February 2014, okay? And we've been talking about, I had great pleasure to be on Jimmy Dore many years ago, and I gave him an education, and I can tell you, because of the way he uses phrases, that he's used that education very well since then, because he had never heard of the coup in 2014. He didn't know the European Association Agreement. He didn't know any of those things. And I explained to him in long detail what happened. And so, George and I were making a breakthrough a long time ago. Okay, I'm not a professor at Columbia University, and Jeffrey Sachs is an extremely well-spoken person. I have a lot of respect.
Right, he is. On the other hand, I mean, Oliver Stone made that film about Maidan. I mean, that was very early on. I can't remember the year. At least maybe 2018, maybe even before.
Something like that. Yeah.
Very good film. Very, not easy to see. I think I have a downloaded. I can't remember. But it's not easy to get access to. But he went into great detail about the overthrow of Yanukovych, which was clearly the seminal event. And I mean, we also said at the time, at least I said at the time, that I think Russia was asleep at the switch. I think Russia was very naive and trusting about what the Western powers were up to. It was clear that they had targeted Yanukovych. They were desperate to get him out, and they were really throwing everything to get him out, including that fake, phony, fraudulent shootings of the demonstrators, which was clear it was not coming from the government but from the opposition. I mean, that's established.
Well,
and yet still say, "Oh, it was the government shot at the protesters."
The perpetrators have come out on record saying that they were involved in this. There's no mystery there whatsoever, but it's still draped in smoke and mirrors. And it's one of the things that I'm sure I can speak for George on this. It's so frustrating. And how do you have an intelligent conversation with someone that doesn't know any of the facts at all? I mean, and in some ways that's kind of intentional. I mean, Piers Morgan, he'll have Mearsheimer, he'll have Jeffrey Sachs, he'll have Norman Finkelstein, and then he'll just revert back. He just
revert back. Exactly. He has the wrong.
He doesn't learn anything. He just
nothing. That's the point. Exactly. Nothing. You learn nothing. You had on Mearsheimer, you had on Sachs, and they went into great detail. And then boom, Putin's little puppet. That's it. After all that, and so
I mean, the problem with Piers Morgan is that he can spend 2 hours with Kevin Spacey, and have this very bizarre conversation. I watched part of it. That's what he does. He does junk culture. Okay.
Yes.
But when it comes to anything really serious, he's a caricature. His script is written on the back of a cereal box.
Well, I think
I mean, the reason why I watch that kind of stuff is that I get kind of a ghoulish pleasure out of watching him being schooled on his own program.
Right. Well, that's the thing. With somebody like Piers Morgan, it's a classic. He himself is entirely wedded to every single cliche, every single fashionable position on everything. That's it. That's what he does. He comes on, whether it's COVID or vaccines or Putin or anything else, he'll just spout the same dribble. But he's cunning enough to know that occasionally you can just make a little dash, and then people then think, hey, you're a real original boy. You're so bold. So it's like he would suddenly say, have we all gone quite mad? And I don't know. Somebody says, hey, I think we should take down Nelson's column because Nelson was an imperialist, blah blah, and so on. Have we all gone quite mad? Yeah, but that's it. The people who say we should take down Nelson's column, they're the people who are regularly on your shows, and they've been spouting this dribble for years and years and years, and we should just take down all statues of imperialists, and you give them airtime. And then, but occasionally you say, oh, have we all gone quite mad? And then people think that you're original, and then you go on and you get, and Rupert Murdoch then gives you a TV show, and and you're on Hannity and everything. He's done it. I mean, in a way, Bill Maher does the same thing. Every single thing. He follows the sort of liberal leftish line, but then occasionally he makes a sort of a quick dash. Parasitic. He steals somebody else's ideas, and I think, whoa, Bill Maher is such an original.
Bill Maher and Piers Morgan, you know what they are? They are safety blankets for their childlike audiences. Okay. They're affirmational in what they say, and and then the people that like both of them the most, they feel comforted by them. Okay? Sometimes maybe I'll get a little edgy.
Yes,
I watch Piers Morgan. I'm on the cutting edge. Okay.
Yeah, it's edgy. Oh well, hey. Suddenly, Bill Maher says, and the feminists, they're terrible. They've been destroying marriage for years and years. And then whoa, Bill Maher, they all really start shouting, and that's it. And then next time he goes back to everything else.
But see, that's the point. He traffics in junk culture issues. Yep. Okay, that's what he does, and that's how he made a name for himself. Oh yeah, I met Nelson Mandela at a party once. It's all the name dropping, and that you're given the assumption that well, since he met somebody, he must be important and he must be smart. There's no reason to believe those things whatsoever. Matter of fact, he spent a lot of time with a lot of other dumb people, as far as I'm concerned.
Well, that's it, and I think that's the thing. He's a master. Both of them are masters of how to play the culture, how to be in with all the fashionable people. I mean, you have all the right views, the liberal leftish views, and then but occasionally you kind of deviate from the script, and that gives you a kind of a reputation for he's an original. He's nobody's man. He's got a mind of his own.
Well, I mean, can someone like Piers Morgan say, "Do you condemn Western imperialism?" I mean, I'd love to hear him say that. For 6 months, do you condemn Hamas? Okay, which I'm not sure what you're getting at here. Okay,
no, I think that was.
Can you ask people, say, do you condemn the Zionist project? Can you condemn that?
But he's not.
He doesn't even know what that means. He's such
he's not going to. He's just saying, "Well, do you condemn this terror?" So, like, do you condemn what Putin did in Ukraine? That's it. He just completely does, the totally pointless question. But it's the kind of thing that gets a stupid discussion on his show going. Because if you say, "Well, I don't think it's very productive to just go around condemning," oh, well, you mean you don't condemn, and then you waste 10, 15 minutes on the issue of whether you condemn or you don't condemn, or why you should condemn or why you shouldn't condemn, and that's it. And that's what it does. And hey, this was a real debate. We were actually exchanging ideas.
I mean,
you weren't talking about anything other than what do you condemn? No, I don't condemn. Why don't you condemn? It's a waste of time.
But this is what we see all the time: that the personalization of geopolitics, and geopolitics and personalities 99% of the time have nothing to do with each other. Okay, but because the way Western audiences have been drip fed about themselves and the outside the garden, I'm going to miss Burrell. Everything's about personalities, always looking for the next Hitler. How many Hitlers have we gone through, George? Saddam, Gaddafi. There's always a Hitler waiting.
Yeah. Anyway, so on our locals page, we have Cynthia, always welcome. Thank you very much, Cynthia. And Cynthia says, after hearing Kevork Almassian speak the other day about the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict, he really piqued my interest in that topic. So I watched some of your past discussions on the topic, all of which were very informative. Thank you. I realized you had Kevork on the Gaggle recently, and your discussion with him on Crocus City attacks was also very informative. But since he's Syrian of Armenian origin, I'd love to see him back to discuss the conflict in the Caucasus. Okay, that's good.
I had Kevork on Crosstalk yesterday.
Exactly. I don't know whether you saw him. He was on.
Excellent.
Yeah. And then Cynthia goes on, which got me thinking, why don't the Armenians just turn the Zangezur corridor into a tollway, thus enabling them to charge Azeris every time they pass through it? That way, the corridor will benefit both sides and hopefully cause the conflict between the two parties to simmer down some. Having such a tollway would be analogous to the way Ukraine has been charging Russians transit fees for allowing their oil pipeline through its territory. I don't think Azerbaijan will accept a tollway. I think they want a direct access.
But it's a good solution.
They're not going to pay Armenia. They don't for getting access to their own territory. That's the way they'll get to argue.
But what a creative solution! I'm very impressed. I agree with George. I mean, if you can take something for free, you're going to take it for free. Okay.
Yeah, and that's the problem. That essentially Armenia has completely given up any idea of fighting Azerbaijan. I mean, just making one surrender after another. So it doesn't look like they're going to fight at all on this Zangezur corridor, and I think they're just going to say, "Hey, Azerbaijan wants to take it. Azerbaijan's going to take it."
Well, it's going to get worse for Armenia. I mean, this is one of these geopolitical situations that just befuddles me. Instead of alienating Moscow, they're trying to court the French and NATO. Armenia is in a very bad neighborhood for itself.
Right.
Historically, Armenia has been in a bad neighborhood. That's why historically the Armenians turned to Russia for protection. Now they're going on a different trajectory, and that is yielding abominable results for them. And why would the Russians really bend over backwards to help them after Armenia's opened up a NATO office? Okay, so. Right. Again, I don't understand the political calculation there. I just don't.
No, I don't either. Anyway, Cynthia goes on. By the way, during your discussion on the Armenia-Azerbaijan conflict back in February, you mentioned that you weren't sure why the Bolsheviks took so much land away from Azerbaijan and gave it to Armenia. Do you think they might have done it as a way to compensate the Armenians for the genocide committed against them by the Ottomans? After all, that's similar to the Jewish victims of the Holocaust got their land from the Palestinians. Well, that's a hard one to say because it's the Azerbaijanis who claim that somehow the Bolsheviks were very, very mean towards them. I think the Bolsheviks were actually quite generous to Azerbaijan, largely because the Bolsheviks really wanted to curry favor with the Muslims.
Right.
Because basically, the Muslims within the Russian Empire, the Bolsheviks had really no in with them. They had made almost no headway among the Muslims, so they were quite anxious to keep the Muslims happy, and that was really throughout the Bolsheviks obviously were very strong among the Russian population, among the Ukrainian population, and obviously the Russians they despised. But they weren't very strong anywhere, and they went out of their way to allocate territory to people that they wanted to curry favor with.
Well, and also, I mean, the Bolsheviks were cruel to everyone. All right,
Yes,
let's be honest.
yes, definitely.
I mean, and that's how many people made careers, by their ferociousness and their cruelty. They showed their bona fides that they were committed. Okay,
Right.
and they, send someone down to Baku and clean it up, and they did. Okay, in the most vicious way. But you also have to keep in mind, when you look at the evolution, particularly of that part of the world, even within the Soviet Union and the history of the Soviet Union, there were a lot of territorial changes. And what Moscow Center wanted is that they would be the ultimate arbiter of who would get what. And some made some progress, some lost, and it was moving around. I mean, Dima Babic reminded me all the different names that Azerbaijan had within the Soviet Union.
Right.
Okay, I mean, autonomous region, all these terms. He gave it to me in Russian, so I don't remember now. But there was a lot.
Created, I think, it was something like a Tri-Caucasus Federation.
Yeah, there you go. See, that's what I'm getting at. That's what I'm getting at here.
Yeah.
But see, I've often said that if I were ever to write a book about Stalin, because there's a lot of books out there about Stalin, I would call it Stalin, the Great Cartographer, because he loved to redraw maps, okay? And being a Georgian, he knew a lot about that region down there. That's why, he had people like Beria around him. He also was a cruel son of a bitch, okay?
Right.
Go down there and fix it for me, okay?
That's right. But that was the thing. I mean, that what the Bolsheviks tried to do was really a reward every part of the Russian Empire, as long as you weren't a Russian. And so that's why they just started carving out all these republics, all the Central Asian republics, the republics in the Caucasus. And you did very well if you weren't a Russian. I mean, and because basically the Bolsheviks really had no in with anyone else. So but they wanted to keep it under control, and that's what they thought. Well, we'll keep it under control because we'll have a communist party. The communist party, it'll be very centralized, all the way down from the Politburo in Moscow, and we're going to run everything. So even though hey, you've got Kazakhstan, we're going to basically run Kazakhstan. So it doesn't matter. We can keep the Kazakhs happy. Giving them some vague ideas. Oh, we respect Kazakh culture, Kazakh language. Oh, we love the Kazakh language, but everything will actually be controlled from Moscow. And I think that's how they thought they could just run the place.
But see, the caveat there is everything would be controlled through Moscow. But you have to remember, and this is something that I wasn't even taught it. I had to learn it myself living here, is that the Bolsheviks had a fanatical hatred for anything Russian. You have to remember that, okay? And that's why they could get these in, say, we don't represent Russian chauvinism. No, we're all about being against it because it's oppressed you, okay? And they played that very, very well. But there also there were problems, obviously, doing it, because if you had like the Ukrainianization of Ukraine, and it went a little bit too far there. Okay, that's the problem they had. But the single most important thread all the way through, particularly up into the 1940s, is that Russia. We have nothing to do with Russian chauvinism whatsoever. Okay, and they did everything to promote everyone else.
That's right, and that's it. That was the Korenizatsiya policy that they create essentially they broke it up, the empire. And they had the sort of the titular nation. So somehow we have the titular nation. So Azerbaijan, they have a titular nation. The Azeris, their republic. It's their titular nation. Kazakhstan, no matter how many Russians are living there, well, it belongs to the Kazakhs. It's their republic. What is interesting, though, and that's, I think, something that hasn't been studied enough because of the general kind of demonization of Stalin, was that he reversed his policy in 1943. I mean, during the Great Patriotic War, when he opened the monasteries, and then when famously in 1945 he gave his toast, the toast to the Russian people, the greatest nation among the nations of the USSR. But he kept that policy in place. He didn't close down the churches and the monasteries after the war. He kept them in place. It was Khrushchev who then began the persecution of the Orthodox Church. So Stalin, in a way, kind of embraced a kind of a Russianism and Russian nationalism, and I think may well have been just out of a feeling of surprising gratitude that the Russians didn't collaborate with the Nazis. Everybody else collaborated, but
absolutely. That's I think you're onto something there, because there were the having your churches shut down, not celebrating Russian culture in any sense, celebrating everybody else's, and then you have someone that wants to destroy the Soviet Union. You'd think a lot of Russians say, yeah, well, we didn't get much out of it, okay? But he was wrong, because Russians fought for their country. They didn't fight for Stalin. They didn't fight for the Bolsheviks. They didn't fight for any kind of idea of communism. They fought for Mother Russia, and Stalin recognized it.
Right. Yeah. No, that's right. They fought for Russia, and then he really was. I mean, he made all those films. Those are famous films. Alexander Nevsky, and then Ivan the Terrible, which was very favorable, quite very favorable towards Ivan. Again, one of the great
good films too.
Good films. He made them during the war. I mean, exactly. They're kind of part of the legend of Soviet cinema. And I think it was a kind of an interesting, if one thinks of the sort of the late Stalin period, because it was also a time of some social conservatism. He restored a kind of the ideal of masculinity. I mean, you look at those Soviet posters, they're very much the masculine ideal, kind of the strong, brawny man who protects his family. I mean, yes, women still went out to work and everything, but it's the man who does the thing. So it's a kind of an interesting perspective. No one's ever really covered it sufficiently, because they're so eager to tell us how terrible Stalin was and how much better all the other Bolsheviks were than Stalin. But this aspect of him, and why in some ways he was a kind of a reconciliation with the Russian people that characterized the late Stalin era, that's hardly ever been covered.
Well, it's interesting, because it was a reconciliation, reconciling some Bolshevik ideas and traditional Russian values, and he brought them together. You have to remember when in the 1920s, women got the vote. There was a lowering of social mores and things like that. Marriage is just prison and stuff like. I mean, a lot of second wave, third wave feminism in the West, they could tap into what a lot of the communists were saying in the 1920s and 30s. But as Stalin became, maybe because of age, maybe it was just out of political expedience, but he became very conservative, and it made it all the way through. I mean, Khrushchev tinkered with a lot of things. Okay, he destroyed more Orthodox churches than Stalin ever did. Okay, but he didn't touch the mosque. He didn't touch. They never touched the mosque.
That's right, and that's you're absolutely right. So the Bolsheviks, they introduced this very radical, radical feminism. I mean, basically,
divorce.
Exactly, a no-fault divorce. In fact, common law marriage, that was just simply recognized. Even if you didn't get married, that was just simply, that's a marriage. And divorce, you just simply go in and you sign your papers. Abortion made legal immediately. Then Stalin in the 1930s already began reversing that. Divorce became increasingly difficult. Abortion, I think, it made illegal sometime in the 1930s, and then became partially legal sometime later. But it's kind of an interesting perspective. We all sort of think of George Orwell. Well, we have our perspective on the Soviet Union through George Orwell. Everybody, Orwell. But Orwell's perspective was that of a Trotskyist. He was a Trotskyist. He was a fan of Trotsky. He loved Trotsky. Animal Farm. You have the good guy, which was Snowball, the Trotsky figure. Napoleon was the bad guy. It was the Stalin figure. But you have it even in 1984, where you have Emmanuel Goldstein, who obviously was the sort of the kind of genius. But the bad guy is Big Brother. Big Brother is obviously Stalin, and we're kind of all very influenced by Orwell's perspective, we don't really appreciate fully Stalin's achievements and how, like, the Stalin was able to, well, obviously to keep the regime in power, but how he was also able to reconcile the regime with the people, something Trotsky could never have achieved.
Well, I'm not a revisionist here, but I'd like to point out uncomfortable truths to people that George and I often do. When you think of the horrific collectivization, the 5-year plans,
Right.
the human costs were vast.
That was terrible.
However, it tooled the Soviet Union up to fight Nazi Germany and to defeat it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. You didn't have to mobilize. They were mobilized. Okay. They had a war economy before the war, and they all knew it. I mean, it was only a matter of time. It was, when Hitler came to power, go through the archives. The Germans are going to get their house in order finally. Now we need some law and order all through the Western world. Who said it's a menace? It was Stalin and his people. This is going to be a problem. These people are going to be a big problem.
It was going to be a big problem, and that chances are we're going to be facing them by ourselves, because why the hell should the Western powers, do anything for us? I mean, there's a common sense. I mean, these are the powers that intervene to try to crush Bolshevism. So why the hell should they do anything for us? And of course, when in 1941, when the attack finally came, they were pretty much by themselves, as they had every reason to expect. They would be facing the entire Nazi war machine by themselves, and so that took some time. It's very hard to see how any other Soviet leader could have accomplished what Stalin accomplished during that war, and and I think even Putin has said that who the hell knows if if it had been anybody else in charge in the Kremlin, whether Russia would have prevailed.
Well, and the Churchill and Roosevelt, the fear in the back of their mind was that Stalin would make a deal to end the war. Okay.
Right.
And, you again, go to the archives. As soon as the Nazis were thrown out of the Soviet Union, Stalin might make a deal. Okay. Right. And the West would, hey, you know why? Because we treated them pretty shabbily for a long time. And,
right.
You have to, you can focus on Stalin all you want, but I mean, look at history. I mean, here, in June 1941, what do you have? The West is trying to conquer Russia again. Okay,
exactly.
And look at 2024. We're right back where we were.
Exactly right. You're there. Russia is on its own and facing not just the entirety of the West, which is the entire European continent, but the United States, Canada, and then you've got all the English-speaking countries, the Australia, New Zealand, and then you've got all these sort of like Japan,
Korea.
Yeah, that's right. And that's quite an alliance. It's to compete against that, you really need you really need to put a number of allies in place.
As you're looking for another question to answer,
Yep.
It's commonly said in Western literature, the Russians are paranoid. You damn straight they are. They got good reason to be.
Yeah, that's right. So Steve K9 says drones are sitting ducks and can be shot down in minutes. Yeah, I think I think that's right. Yeah, and I think then we have it was something else I saw. Hugh Keenan says Charles Bukowski look-alike George. I don't know that. That's not exactly flattering. Charles Bukowski look-alike. I mean, he's that drunken bohemian. He wrote these books. Not my thing. And there was a movie made about Bukowski, starring Mickey Rourke.
I think George is a good-looking version of Donald Sutherland.
Yeah, I like that. That's a good one. Yeah, that's a good one.
I got your back, George.
Thank you so much. Yes, Anna Jackson says Bill Maher makes my head hurt. That's well put. I think he does. He's just
you just think with the amount of money he makes from HBO that he could hire some intelligent writers.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Or maybe he just writes it himself. He's so cheap. But
yeah,
it's really cheap content. His arrogance is unbearable.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, he's so damn full of himself. But he has this captive audience who just love everything he says. Always finding it hilarious.
Safety blanket. That's what it is.
Yeah, that's it. And people are dying to go on his show. And it's all about him. That's the whole point about the show. It's about him. So if you go on his show, you're there in order to make him look good.
George looks like a young Aaron Mate. Well,
yeah,
there's
that I can see that. I mean, I think not so much the young. I think probably his father. I mean, Aaron Mate.
Well, you look young. You could be brothers. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, his father. Yeah, and let's see. Yeah. So we got nice kind of array of people from all over the world, and so we've got people in Canada, we've got Australia. This boy TV says the Paris Peace Conference redrew a big part of the world. Yes, it definitely did. The drawback was that, of course, that the beneficiaries, they wanted to keep the goodies that that the Paris Peace Conference allocated to them. Those who lost out wanted to rescind the Paris Peace Conference. So that became a real problem. It didn't last for very long. By the mid-1930s.
Yeah, I mean, the Paris Peace Conference inspires much of what we call the global South today, because they see the injustices, the next wave of Western imperialism, and what we see in the Middle East right now is a direct outcome of those peace treaties ending the First World War.
Right. Yeah.
We're living.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
Everyone, right before we went on, I bought these toys for my dogs. This is why I don't invest in them. Look, this is really hard plastic. Okay, I'll give it back in a second. All right.
Yeah, that's they are quite ruthless. I mean, it's like these wild dogs. They just tear the flesh of their prey. So they just destroy these things immediately. And here we have
greetings to Mexico.
Yeah, that's good. Steve Hainan has been suggesting for a year or more that Russia take out the surveillance drones in the Black Sea. And there's an excessive degree of caution on the part of Russia. No, you're absolutely right. That's exactly what Russia should do. I mean, they're there for the purposes of spying on Russia, providing information, tactical information to Ukraine with a view to killing Russians. So absolutely should be taken.
George, what makes it even more pathetic, it doesn't change the correlation of forces on the battlefield in Ukraine.
No, it doesn't. No, the goal is, of course, to inflict pain on Russia and think, hey, this is going to go on and on forever. You will never enjoy peace. We're just going to keep doing this, and that's I think the message they want to convey. DJ 5314 says, show us proof of life of Johnny Apple, like him peeing on the Washington Post. I don't know whether, Peter, you want to
First of all, I'm under sanction. I can't use the SWIFT system. I can't get a hard copy of the Washington Post. Okay. Right. Maybe I could print it out. Yeah, I could. Yeah, it would take some work. Okay. But I wouldn't want Little Apple to be even in close proximity to the Washington Post. It's going bankrupt, everyone. That's the good news. Okay. Hopefully it will be out of business soon. Okay. And no one watching this podcast is going to weep over it.
No, I agree. So there's a comment here about Trump. This is Takfiri Hunter. Trump is the most pro-Israeli president in U.S. history since Woodrow Wilson. I think he's probably the most pro-Israel. And then says Trump's biggest backers are Christian Zionists who cheer on the bombing of Christian churches. The thing is that I've always thought that the problem is with the support of Israel isn't really the Christian Zionists. The problem is who wields power in the United States. And I think ultimately the people who have a lot of money, they're the powerful donors, and they can make or break little worms who don't do their bidding. And I think we've seen politicians who step out of line and how they are quickly targeted. It's nothing to do with the Christian Zionists. They become targeted by AIPAC, by all the assorted pro-Israeli Jewish organizations, and then they are absolutely destroyed. And I think that, we've seen this now of how these very, very wealthy donors to all these universities, Columbia, Harvard, and so on, how they make their money, their financial power really hurt. Hey, we wield power. Do you want us to withhold this money from you? No? Well, then you better do as we say. And that's really the way, American political life works.
I don't think Donald Trump even knows what the word Zionism means. Okay?
I don't think so. No.
And I'm gonna back George on this here. Sure, I think you could make a case that Donald Trump is the most pro-Israel president the United States has ever had. But I would rephrase it in using George's description. He's the most pro-donor,
right,
of people supporting Israel in presidential history. I don't think he knows what Zionism is, and I don't think he's ever even asked. He doesn't care.
No, I really don't. I think he's somebody who who knows where the money is, and he needs this, and he thinks that that hey, if these donors decide that Biden isn't doing enough for Israel, Biden is somehow withholding. I don't know what the hell he's supposed to be withholding. There's no evidence he's withholding anything, but he's withholding arms from Israel. Then they're going to switch. They're going to switch with their massive funds to Trump, and I think that's his calculation. And I think
it'll be very interesting, George. I don't know if you came across it. I came across it my morning. Is that I think it was coming out of Politico? Is that Democratic operatives are in a state of quote unquote depression because Trump's fundraising is surpassed by a significant amount Biden's fundraising, and I wonder how much that is of donor money. I don't know.
Yeah, that's right. Speaking of Biden, I know you have for quite some time. You, unlike me, have believed that Biden will be replaced. I don't know if you still believe that the Democrats will replace Biden before the election, but that doesn't matter. I mean, I don't know.
No, well, I mean, I'll go even further. I'm not even convinced there will be an election. But go ahead.
Okay, all right, that's fair. But first of all, I mean, there is a question I think is quite baffling. Is why is Biden so insistent on being reelected? I mean, he's obvious. It must be obvious to him. Must be obvious to the people around him that he's not physically and mentally up to the job to be there for another 4 years. I mean, so you think, why are they so insistent upon this? I mean, why not just step aside and let someone else? But be that as it may, if they do decide to replace him, I think that it's going to be very difficult to replace him with anyone else but Hillary Clinton, because she's the one who's actually run twice for the nomination. She says, hey, it's got to be me. On what basis do you replace him with Michelle Obama? I mean, she hasn't run for anything. Or Gavin Newsom, he's never run for the nomination. So it's a very difficult for them to do it and not basically give it to Hillary Clinton.
I agree. I think you're absolutely right. Hillary isn't done with us yet.
Okay? No, I don't think so at all. And I think she would be extremely angry if they decide, oh well, we're just going to bring in Gavin Newsom. It's like, well, what's his right? How does he get to do it? And in fact, that's really the issue now, is that they've left it to the point where there really isn't any real basis for bringing anyone else in, unless he has some physical collapse. But if he does collapse physically, something happens to him, it's going to be hard not to give it to Harris.
Everyone, let's just leave it at this, is that I'm not convinced that Joe Biden will be on the ballot. Up until the time that the ballot papers are printed, I think it's open. Because let's go back to 2016. Remember when Hillary had her episode when they had to throw her in the back of a van? Quite humiliating. Okay. And then it seems to me that they had some kind of body double come out afterwards. That was weird. Okay. Right. But the DNC, up until the ballot papers are printed, the DNC can determine who's ultimately the nominee. Now, George and I have been through this before. I don't know what the rules are for the Republican Party, but for the DNC, that's definitely the case. Okay. We'll see. I mean, George and I did I think one of our more fun podcasts about, the upcoming debate. Okay. I think we pretty much went from every single possible trajectory of what it means, what it could mean, why it's happening. I'm going to be watching it just out of curiosity. I'm not enamored by either candidate, to be honest with you. Okay, so but it's kind of late imperial politics.
Well, that's right. Of course, there is the interesting aspect, which is will Trump reveal before the debate who his VP choice is?
The choice will be in the room.
That's right. But the choice will be in the room. The point is that if he brings 8 people with him, and he could bring them with him, and say, well, yeah, the choice is in the room. It's going to be one of these 8 people. I mean, obviously, it's a very interesting.
It's going to be J.D. Vance.
You think it is?
I think so. And I think it's a mistake on his part, but.
No, I think that would be a good move by.
I think it'd be a good move. Okay, I just think that J.D. Vance needs a little bit more time. I think he has an amazing political career ahead of him because I think he's that smart and moral. I'm not sure it's a good idea to hook his train up to Trump. We've been over this. I know.
Yeah, I think
George is right. Anyone that's asked is going to take it. Okay, you're right.
Well, yeah, you have to take it because he's there. They also. You have a pretty good chance of. I mean, if you look at the polls, and it's always very tricky looking at the polls, but the polls are pretty good for Trump. His chances of winning are pretty decent.
What did the Economist said? 2 out of 3, right?
The Economist said that. The interesting thing is with the polls is that Trump is winning in the battleground states. That's where he's winning. And yet, if you look at the national polls, it seems to be absolutely even. You know,
and it doesn't matter.
It's I agree. It's the battleground states that matter, and Trump seems to be ahead in pretty much all of them. So Vance comes in. Once you're VP, you have an in. I mean, it's going to be very difficult to dislodge you when times come for the nomination in 2028. Going to be hard to take him. Also, for Trump, it's a good idea that he becomes impeachment proof, because I don't think the Senate want to replace Trump with J.D. Vance, because they think, hey, Vance is a Trumpian with a little more, youth and energy and even more kind of education. And,
more culturally acceptable. Come on,
yeah. But the problem, is for Trump, if he goes to someone like Marco Rubio, or worse, Scott, Scott of South Carolina, that gives him no protection from impeachment. I mean, on the contrary, it guarantees his impeachment, because they're saying, yeah, fantastic, we're going to get Rubio. Rubio is our dream president. We can get whatever we want. We can just roll him, and Rubio will do as we want. Same with Scott. I mean, it was not the brightest bulb in the world. Absolutely, they'd love to have Scott as president. So that it guarantees Trump's impeachment if he chooses either of them.
I'd just be very curious with our hypothetical situation how J.D. Vance would navigate all of that. Okay, because George is right. I mean, I've been a fan of J.D. Vance for ages. I mean, way before he even got into politics. Hillbilly Elegy is a wonderful book. Ron Howard made it into a film. The film wasn't great, but it was, it's a story there. But a lot can happen between now and then. It could be a Midas touch, or it could be the kiss of death.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to say. But with the rest of them, you're right. I mean, Marco Rubio, I mean, Democrats are praying for that. Okay, they'll roll him in a nanosecond. Okay, as long as he gets to fight his wars, he'll make Lindsey Graham Secretary of Defense and of the state at the same time, and they'll go down their primrose path. Okay.
That's right. And then somebody talks about Roy Cohn, Trump and Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn's a kind of an interesting figure, and it's always brought up as to show us what a horrible person Trump was, because in a way he learned a great deal from Roy Cohn. Roy Cohn, if people don't know, he was a kind of a very sharp legal operator who kind of cut his teeth on McCarthy's Senate committee, as did, of course, Bobby Kennedy. So Bobby Kennedy and Roy Cohn were both counsel to McCarthy's committee. But Cohn then became a legal practitioner, a very sharp legal player
and fixer.
Exactly. But very good at it. Very good at doing getting things done. And so he acquired this legendary reputation. And then he looked a phenomenally ugly looking man. I mean, if you look at his face, he was very, very, very
scary. He's scary.
Exactly. Very ugly. So he was Trump's mentor. But sure, that's
we could do worse for mentors.
Yeah, I think so.
I mean, I'm not saying anything particularly good about Cohen, but he knew he understood the law, he understood retail politics, and he understood how to put it. George just said it right. How to get things done.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. That's exactly that, how to get things done. Anyway, so Peter, you have any final closing thoughts?
I think that we should do this more often,
Mm-hmm.
and George and I will convene, and maybe we can do it a couple hours later in the day, and that might be a good idea. I think you'd like that.
That'd be good. Yeah.
So yeah, I really I like this, and I'm very appreciative that people are want George and I to speak to you live, because we always do the podcast, and I do my program, but very rarely do live things, and I like it.
It's a lot of fun. It really is a lot of fun. People bring up all sorts of
but I find
interesting.
it really interesting. So many of the comments are about how to describe you, George. It's really interesting. Okay. I think someone said you look like a music teacher. Is that a good thing?
That's more complimentary. I mean, it's it was, so sometimes people say, oh, really, that's
well,
not.
when I was growing up, okay, through my lifetime, I've been told that I look like one or two different people. Who do you think they are?
Woody Allen.
Woody Allen? No way. Okay. Come on, does anybody want to take a stab at it? One was a kind of a country rock singer. No takers. John Denver. I used to get that all of the time. That's maybe a lot of people don't know who that is.
John Denver, yeah, really?
Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. And
I would never have thought of describe you as like John Denver.
At RT at work, you have to have a what do you call those cards? Swoosh cards. So right, electronic card. We could move around the building because the security. And so I was going to one of the turnstiles, and the security guard was on the phone, and he said, "Elton John is here." That's what they call me. That's what I'm called by security at work. They call me Elton John. Jimmy Buffett, Mel Brooks, me or George?
I don't see the Mel Brooks thing. And then Peter Lavelle is Vladimir Putin. I don't think you look like Vladimir Putin. But I have to say, I mean, Putin looks very different today than he did when he was this.
Oh yeah.
I sat next ghost-like figure that when he was young.
I sat next to him for 90 minutes, and one thing, we asked him a series of questions. I got to ask him a question, and two observations: he listens, he takes notes, and he has no cards, and none of it was stock answers.
Right.
I mean, it was he listened and took it in and answered. It was really impressive for an hour and a half.
Yeah. Now it's said that he understands English. I mean, you asked your question in English. Do you think he understood it as when you were asking, or he was getting a translation simultaneously?
No, he wasn't. There was we had a translator. Well, actually, Margarita Samagnon wanted to translate my question. And I said, Mr. President, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask my question in English. I could have done it in Russian. I would have had to practice a little bit, but I could have done it. No, you do it in English. And Margarita, she started to translate, and he said, no, put them out. I understand. And he answered it, and he answered the question that I asked.
Right.
So no one gave him the translation.
But he answered in Russian, and so yeah.
Later, 2 or 3 days later, I'm in the center of Moscow. And people, I saw you on TV. I saw you, and I just said, I work in TV. I'm on TV all the time. But they put it on Russian language television, okay? And somebody translated me. There was only one question in English, so it was so frustrating for me is that people were looking at me and asking me questions. I thought, I'm on television all the time. Okay, but
yeah. Well, anyway. Thank you so much, everybody who's joined us. It was a lot of fun, great pleasure. We're going to do this again next Monday. Johnny Apple, shows up always awake.
Is awake.
That's quite an honor. You know, that you actually not taking a rest from all the rests that you normally take. But remember, if you like the Gaggle, please like, share, and subscribe. See you soon. Bye.